Hello, welcome back to Business and Technology in Tennessee, a podcast brought to you by InfoSystems. I'm Josh Davis, the Marketing Director at InfoSystems, and with me today I've got a couple of special guests from a local Chattanooga-based company called Skytec LLC, and I've got Bill Rogers and Andy Carroll, and you guys are the chiefs at the company. Chief Executive and Chief Technology Officer. So I'm excited about this today because I've got friends who dabble in drones and unmanned flying vehicles, technology stuff. And like we were just kind of chatting before we hit record, it's such a new thing that I would imagine, especially from your all's perspective, it's still like the wild, wild west as far as what you can and can't do, regulations, what you're calling the technology and all of this. So hopefully today we get to answer a bunch of those questions from your perspective at least, and have an interesting discussion. So just to get started, I'd like to know a little bit about how you decided to start Skytec. How did you just one day say, hey man, drones are cool, I want a drone company? Or was it a really long process of planning on how you can use some emerging technology? What was that like?
I think it was probably a combination of just interest in the technology for both of us and probably a little bit of fate. Yeah. We happened to go to the same high school, so Andy was exploring the technology, I was too. We connected, and probably within 10 or 15 minutes we decided, hey, this is going to be a big part of the future. Let's try to get involved.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. For me, I'd always kind of been in the mapping and remote sensing technology sector. And, I think I was watching 2020 or something that, older people like Generation X generally
Don't
watch
date yourself here.
Yeah, so we were watching that, and I saw that this DJI Phantom, and amazing, for $1,000 you can have your own unmanned platform. And I just started thinking, it's like, wow, I could take my own aerial photographs. I could, you could pull all this into our mapping systems. And so that's what got me into it. And then, like Bill said, we had the common friend. It's like, hey, you ought to go see what Andy's doing in his research lab. And then from there, we just kind of started exploring the technology, and then it took a life of its own after a couple months. We got serious about it and really thought it was a huge opportunity and the next, potential scalable platform with mapping and other inspection and other pieces.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about how industries get started, because when you think about, InfoSystems is an IT company, and we've been around since sort of the very beginning of computer networking. But if you think about the people that started the IT industry back in the day, I mean, these are kids that were going into Radio Shack and tinkering around with whatever computer was out on display and stuff like that. So I think, the drone, or whatever you want to call it, industry is sort of like the next thing in that lineage where there's this emerging technology, and a lot of hobbyists that were just super interested in the technology are probably the ones who are going to be pioneering the beginnings of business application for all of the technology. Do you have any thoughts about people that you know who are also enthusiasts, whether they have visions of being professional, whether it's just a hobby for them, and where do you see the industry going with that first wave of people who are really putting the technology to use?
I would say 3 years in, it's pretty incredible. There's more unmanned aircraft in the skies than manned aircraft, so it's exploding. But people use it for all sorts of purposes. I mean, some fly for fun on the weekend and take the kids to the park and get some neat pictures. Then there are others that are using lower end systems for commercial purposes. They're flying any kind of events like weddings or doing roof inspections, etc., or even getting into photogrammetry, which I'm sure we'll do a deeper dive on that. Yeah. But there is a limit that you kind of hit your head on with the technology, because hey, it'll only do so much for a lower price, and it does require a sizable investment to kind of take that next level. So I think a lot of people are reluctant to do that because the technology is so new, and when it's kind of on the cutting edge, that's when it's the priciest too. So that should change as the years go by, and hopefully the cost will come down for some of that. But that's why we feel like we have a exceptionally good head start in the space.
Well, and I think if you talk to Clay Hales, who's the founder of InfoSystems, about those early days, he was making major investments in technology and in people, really, who had the right expertise. And that it was risky back in those days. You know, what's funny is InfoSystems started as a division in a more traditional company, which was at the time called A&A Business Machines, and they sold IBM typewriters. And they wanted to, there was this computer networking thing coming out from IBM. They wanted to explore it. They had a division in the company doing it. And ultimately, the owner of A&A Business Machines said, this is not really profitable. I don't see the future yet, so I'm going to shut down this division. And so that group, led by Clay Hales, just decided to step out and form their own company and keep going. And so I would imagine, like you all are experiencing some of the same things as far as taking on risk, making major investments, not really knowing what's a year or two down the road, but at the same time giving you a pretty good head start on some potential competitors.
Yeah, going back to your question right before that, when you were talking about is there, this RC hobbyist type of contribution, definitely. I'm thinking about yesterday when we had one of the manufacturers we work with out of Orlando have an amazing system, but it's two guys, they're actually brothers, but maker types, I mean, just genius electrical engineers, and hey, we got to put a new two-step circuit in today, and let's change this electronic distribution board. And the guy was in there, hey, can you go get some soldering materials for me? And I mean, so there's very much still that on the edge, creative maker type of atmosphere in the industry. But you've also got the big industry starting to open up and commercialize more and more. The McDonnell Douglas, the Lockheed Martins, the Northrop Grumman, Airbus, they're all starting to realize the commercial opportunity. But
yeah, and I would also say the growth is exponential. So going back to maybe how InfoSystems got started, and then there's sort of year-over-year progressions of the hardware and software, and more capabilities are coming online. Unmanned systems are totally different. Day one, for under $1,000, you can get an aircraft that it doesn't matter if you're 8 or 80, you can fly it right out of the box.
Yeah.
Great camera, great ability to take high-end 4K video, and so there's this explosion of people utilizing the technology. But I think what people forget is these little tiny robots now taking flight, but they operate in the national airspace.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all this additional regulation and consideration that has to be given to aerial unmanned systems because it's under the purview of the FAA. So even though, that doesn't always mean people are doing the right thing. And commercial entities like ourselves, we always have to abide by the rules and operate at the highest safety level possible. But it's kind of hard to corral all those people now because the technology is vastly outpacing the government's ability to kind of regulate.
Yeah, that, as you were saying that, it made me think about, I'm a product of the 80s. That was kind of when I went through my childhood, and I remember all the movies coming out about like the hackers and things like that back in the 80s, early 90s, and you had the one with Matthew Broderick. I can't remember what's the name
War
of that.
Games.
War Games, yeah. I mean, stuff like that. So what's your best prediction on when we see the first drone movie about, some private drone hacking?
Well, there's one being made right now.
Yeah.
It's a hilarious spoof almost, but I've read it's a real movie where a drone attacks and AI comes to life, and it sort of becomes a monster. So The technology is vilified sometimes because, hey, you spying on my neighbor, you doing this, you doing that. So I think the spoof is coming on the technology, and there'll be others to follow. But hopefully everybody will keep conforming to the rules and doing the right thing, because we want to see the industry flourish.
Right. So let's talk a little more about what you guys are doing in your business. I mean, you've gotten some local publicity lately in the Times Free Press and Business Trend magazine, and just through reading what they wrote, I've got a little bit of experience in the understanding like the GIS software. I worked for a company that did software for economic development agencies, and we had to tie our systems into a lot of the GIS type software, because the economic developers always want to break down the data and then tie that back into their business systems. How is it that you guys are working with the GIS and other types of technologies? Tell me a little about what you're doing day to day.
Yeah, well, everything that we're collecting from the unmanned systems, I mean, that's a geographic space or location. And so all you have to do, with GPS or GNSS technology is, pull that into the system. And so right away, there's this whole new level of data that is really unparalleled. I mean, you can get ultra high resolution, whatever sensor you put on, get a perspective that you can't easily repeat from boots on the ground. We can fly below clouds when manned aircraft are stuck above them or in them. It's a different platform from satellite altogether, because we're getting, where satellite might be able to get 1 meter resolution, some of the latest technologies out there, we're doing 1 centimeter or less. So it's just this very rich, super robust information that can all be piped directly into geographic information systems or remote sensing technology. So whether that's Google Maps for a real light end user, or someone that's just a consumer of spatial data and they don't know it, we can go out, fly a drone, and they're using some of our data product right away. Or is it a EPA regulated Superfund site with a team of engineers and environmental scientists that have very specific needs? We can go out and collect for them as well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So,
and go ahead.
I would just echo that a couple of different things is, what's the need? Because if we understand and can well define the need, then there's probably a remote sensor that can go on the aircraft, whether it's methane sensing or a specialized corona camera for utilities, to magnometers that detect metal in the ground, LiDAR that does laser scanning, very high-end thermal, where it can tell you 0.5 degree centigrade of temperature when you click on any pixel. These things are very high-end, very robust, and the client has a specific data need, so they in turn can service their clients and do their job, whether it's permitting, designing, whatever. So hey, can these unmanned systems excuse me, go out and grab this high-end data set for me so I can continue to work on the project, and the other people on the team can work on the project. Now the thing is, it produces gigantic, enormous data sets. So I bet there's not a week that goes by that we don't get several calls, hey, we'd like to process your data or be involved in that, because we also think, hey, that's an element of AI where you need vast, huge data sets for machine learning, kind of jam all that data in there and push the AI agenda forward. So unmanned systems will play a much more critical role in that in the future. I don't know if this is accurate. I've heard almost 10 gigabytes a mile for driverless cars is the amount of data it produces. So you can't upload that somewhere, have it processed, back download to the car. The data is just exploding, and unmanned systems are also kind of on the forefront of that, because if we go out and fly, we're grabbing very large data sets, but that's our expertise also, is to turnkey the process to acquire that data, thoroughly analyze it, and then use that as a mechanism to inform the power of information.
Yeah, I'd like to get into data a little bit more in a moment, but I was curious, when I read one of the articles recently, it sounded like you guys were trying to remain really focused on deploying your technology for the right types of projects. You know, like maybe people are reaching out for drone projects that don't necessarily need the type of equipment that you have that would be way overkill. Can you talk a little about the types of projects where the technology you have is really intended to be used?
Yeah, definitely. I think with the LiDAR scanners, you know, we're one of the few operators that have some of the highest resolution laser scanning sensors on unmanned systems right now. And that allows us to do things that, I mean, it's an enormous time and cost savings for clients like engineers or surveyors that want to go out and, excuse me, let's say they have, 2,000 acres of a forested land tract. And, traditionally that might take 1 to 2 weeks of hacking with a machete and doing ground run topo work. Well, we'll partner with those firms. They'll go out and establish ground control, and then we'll scan with our system and be able to do in a day what would take 2 weeks. And so that's a huge increase in capability. And that's something that also distinguishes our technology from some of the other operators out there. If you were to go out just with a camera and try to do photogrammetry to collect and create that accurate data set, you wouldn't be able to do it where you have a lot of ground cover, where you have grasses or trees or even buildings and structures that obstruct the view of the camera. But with the laser scanner technology, we can go out and really provide this premier engineer design grade type product.
So would it be, let's say you've got an individual who's looking to build a new home on a tract of land they just purchased. Is that too small of a project, or would it be more like a Volkswagen who's going to build a new factory in some rural area, or is it something in between that would be kind of the ideal use case for?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what's on the site, for some of these small tracks. I mean, right now we've gained the most traction where there's something that you want to know in a precise measurement about a volume on this, or, so an environmental site where we have material, we don't want it leaving the site. We want to know exactly how much material we have. Mm-hmm. That makes a lot more sense for the laser scanner. For single home residential, sure, we do it, but I don't think the economics are quite there yet. I mean, these scanners are, making it work on our business side for something that small. We're still trying to figure out where that threshold is, and it's always constantly moving. I mean, especially on the other end, as far as what's too big for unmanned systems and where does it make sense to bring in a manned aircraft. If you talked to us a year ago, that number would have been several thousands of acres smaller. And now with some of our new capabilities, we're pushing more and more into the world of what manned aircraft can do.
So really, nothing's too small if the client wants to pay for it, but sometimes it gets cost prohibitive to mobilize to a smaller site. So again, we're, that probably 250 to 500 acres is getting to be, just the right spot, but the technology's moving so fast. We just flew a brand new aircraft yesterday with a brand new sensor on it. We really don't know how much we can fly in a day, but hopefully we'll find out very soon. And it could be thousands of acres. We're the only one in the country that we know of flying LiDAR on a brand new hybrid system, which is gasoline engine, battery backup as well. And we're getting some really long flight times where before we were getting 10 minutes, now we're getting up to about an hour or so and carrying much heavier payloads. So we really don't know where the edge is, so to speak, of what can be done in a day. But I also think, just to comment on your question before, is one thing we try to steer away from is what is not a good use of the technology. So we decline jobs all the time that just are either too dangerous or are going to press the boundaries of staying within the confines of the rules that the FAA has laid down. And that's one thing that's kind of getting our young industry in trouble and does need more leadership in is, hey, how do we safely operate and do the jobs that are the highest and best use of the technology? So sometimes people ask us, can you fly through this bridge? Can you, hang this sign? Can you do this, do that? That probably can be done with the technology, but why risk the equipment and personnel and maybe do more harm than good to ourselves? So really, there's no safety standard. Everybody has this rule book and the lanes they have to stay in with unmanned technology, but we've also tried to exude some leadership in this space by being the very first unmanned company in the world to get a platinum safety rating. This is through a group called Argus. Mm-hmm. They've always gone in and vetted manned aircraft departments for safety. Now they're getting more in the unmanned world, so after a 2 very intensive 2-day audit, we got through it and got the first platinum certification. So not only does that make us a better operator, it gives our clients and our customers more of a comfort level that, hey, these guys at least are making the highest effort possible, so there's no problems on my job site. Now I want to be careful, the technology is not infallible because it's very young, but anything you can do to mitigate risk, therefore it has a better chance to sort of push the industry forward, and not many competitors are doing that when we all should be, because it's good for us all if we're all operating at a very high level with safety first and foremost on our minds.
Yeah, I can draw parallels sort of from what I know about the IT industry and what I can see behind the curtains at InfoSystems. There's a lot of trust that goes into these types of relationships when you're managing IT systems for companies who may have lots of sensitive data, or whether it's sensitive customer data or whether it's IP that they need to protect at all costs, and you're promising to deliver certain services. And there's sort of this line of delineation where everything on the front is the messaging, where you're telling the customer what you're going to do and what you can do, and then behind that the customer really doesn't see a whole lot of the actual delivery, or how you're piecing things together to deliver the service. So there is a lot, in IT, especially now that cloud is so pervasive, there's a lot of potential for people to take shortcuts and put customers at risk and do things in ways that aren't to the top, highest standard, highest quality. And, so I can draw a lot of parallels in what you're saying about the, unmanned drones.
And we're a young company. We're not allergic to revenue. We'd love to have more. And it's tough to be disciplined to say, hey, this is really not for us. Yeah. And we've done that a lot over the last 3 or 4 years of being very careful to build a rock solid reputation that, hey, when we got some of the toughest projects with the most valuable data needs to be collected, hey, let's call Skytec, because those guys are safe operators, they're very professional, they're going to get the job done, and they're going to deliver on time. So we'd rather make our reputation that way instead of call those guys, they'll do anything.
Yeah, right.
So my favorite one that we turned down was to go chase the Canada geese off of my neighbor's property or something. It was some crazy, like go chase birds with the drone. I was like, I don't think that's
Yeah, my favorite one is we can't talk about because it's a big local company and they wouldn't. But anyway, we've gotten some really sort of wonky requests that we kind of look at each other and go, we'd love to work with you, but we don't want to do that.
Yeah, like when somebody calls you and asks if you can spy on their neighbor or something. No, it's not really what we do, sorry.
Well, I mean, even in the film industry, I mean, you got heavy lift systems. These are big budget things, and it was a real expertise 2 years ago, but we're hearing it's not the same way now that, hey, Fred's uncle has a cousin that's got a 107 license and this little drone, and they'll do it for $50 a day. So, some of that is a little bit of a race to the bottom already, even in a young technology that, hey, it's a numbers game where so many people are doing it, people have options, but when you're like our company and you're kind of on the cutting edge of the technology and you've made the investment in the sensors because we're trying to, keep it on the very high end of who we work with and what information we're gathering. So
Yeah. So let's get back to the data discussion real quick. It sounds to me like some of what you're offering to customers is not just what the drone can do in the air, capturing data from sensors, but once you actually collect the data, then you're able to provide services based on the data. What are the goals there for, sort of the after the fact, once you have data, helping customers use it, store it out?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of, I spent most of the first half of my career in the GIS and the data side of things, and so that's definitely what I wanted to see Skytec really have a very robust service model for data and analytics. And so, kind of in our tagline of acquire, analyze, inform, 2/3 of it is about the data.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's, I think part of it is being realistic, is that the collection systems, the unmanned systems, they're going to evolve so rapidly, but at the end of the day, the service that we provide is answering questions for our clients by either going out collecting data or taking their existing data and fusing it with new information that we bring into the GIS system. So we maintain robust relationships with Autodesk and Esri, which are two of the big players in the CAD and then the GIS sector.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those probably have a majority market share in their industries. And so we're able to take the information and give it to the client and the exact software they need. And going into it early, what key metrics, what numbers, what values do you need to help you answer the question? Whether that's how many metric tons of fill capacity I have left on this landfill, or where is all the water flowing off of this property? Is it an environmental concern? Can I pull in other GIS data from the county or the cities or the states to see, is this stream impaired? Is this client potentially, running off into an impaired stream? So it's just being able to answer the precise questions that, the client has with that experience. So
Yeah.
we do, some cloud hosting of the application development, so custom data delivery platforms. And I think Bill kind of alluded to it earlier. Being able to go out and collect this information, you get this overwhelming amount of data. And so a client may have a 10-year-old computer running a 2010 version of AutoCAD. How do I take, 2 terabytes of point clouds and get that into your data? So it's something that we're working on. Lots of other people are working on it too, but it's something that we kind of feel like it's a unique offering with the company.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would add is because of Andy's experience and his team's experience working with some very large global clients, I think we've also gotten recognized of the data expertise of, hey, taking this massive data, which is information, that's power, and help me make my job or task easier by putting it through the GIS software and several different pieces of software and making it more bite-sized and usable. But since we've been able to do that consistently, now we're also getting other data type of projects of, hey, I have this sustainability program and I need your element of GIS expertise to do this. Could you maybe the latest and greatest data, gather that with unmanned systems, or there's all sorts of historical data and other ways to do those GIS projects. So we're not only doing it via unmanned systems, but also we have a lot of in-house GIS expertise led by Andy, of course, that we're able to do a lot of other high-end projects as well.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity ahead for Skytec, not only in the collecting of data, but all the services you can provide around it, which is, it's an exploding area, so you guys are probably very excited about the future of your company, I'm sure. So before we wrap up the discussion, I'm curious to know what's the most, maybe what's the funniest thing that's happened, or the biggest learning experience you've had while you were on a project? Any good stories to tell from your experience so far?
My first reaction to that is our failures.
Yeah.
There's been plenty of high five moments and funny stories and lighter moments, but really the first thing that pops into my mind is what have been some of our failures, because anybody in this space that says they hadn't had them just hadn't had them yet.
Yeah,
because
right.
they're coming, because the technology is not infallible. You can do everything possible to do the proper maintenance and training and everything else, and robots sometimes have a mind of their own, or the little aircraft do, and they can go hinky. So we've had a couple of times where we've had some failures with either the sensors or aircraft, but it's the learning process of those failures of, we go from the white knuckle moment to, the days and weeks afterwards of really, okay, what could we have done different? What have we done different? And a couple of times we just shrug our shoulders and say, we can't think of a thing. This has been under the microscope. So that's tough as entrepreneurs. You kind of want to, you want to make it up on the fly and roll with the punches, so to speak. But sometimes it's just kind of out of your hands. So as a young company and a young technology, those failures have probably paid the biggest dividend for us, because that's really propelled us much faster of, okay, that stung, now let's put a Band-Aid on it and keep moving at light speed. So
Yeah, we had a couple funny things come out of a project in Michigan and Upper Peninsula earlier. I guess it was last fall. It was freezing cold, snowing all over us, and one of our pilots was just laughing, and the conditions were miserable, but he got out of the truck and he had garbage bags wrapped around his shoes because he's trying to insulate any way he could, like all taped up around his boots, and felt sorry for him, but it was a pretty hilarious moment. And so like Bill was saying, just overcoming those obstacles and laughing and learning along the way.
Yeah.
Examples like that.
That's awesome. And you're absolutely right. The learning opportunities from failure are just as important as all of the good times and everything. I can say I've been in the IT industry for going on 10 years, and there's times, like you said, where something goes wrong, and after the fact, you always have a post discussion about what happened, what could we have done to prevent it, how do we make sure this never happens again. And sometimes you leave those meetings saying, there's no way to predict that. There's no way we could have ever known that would have happened. But the difficulty is explaining that to a customer, who has certain expectations. They just want to see everything go right, and explaining, well, this happened, this is why, this is why we never could have anticipated that, but here's our commitment to make things right moving forward. And I think those moments have really done more for this company over the last 25 years as anything, because really what those things do is give you an opportunity to prove your commitment to your customer after the fact. When something goes wrong and you're able to say, hey, something messed up, whether it's your fault or not, you can either do the bare minimum to try and get out of the situation, or you can go way overboard and make things absolutely right for your customer and earn a whole lot of trust.
Yeah, besides being super proud of the team we've assembled and the mission and kind of where we're headed as a company, probably right below that would be ranking when we did have those failures. I can say 100% of the time the client came back for more, and they always cited, hey, it's because of the way you handled yourself. You didn't panic, you didn't run off, you took responsibility, and we want to give you guys another opportunity. Hey, we're grateful, we appreciate that. I mean, you have to be mindful of those simple things that, hey, you got to keep hitting the marks to service your client base, but do it in a fair way of, hey, when you step in it, you stepped in it, just own up to it. And again, they remind us of that. Hey, we're going to give you another chance because of the way you handled that. So yeah, those failures you learn a lot from.
So before we officially sign off here, how can people keep up with what you guys are doing? Is there a blog feed, a news feed? How do you plan to communicate the growth of your company and all the cool stuff you're going to be doing?
Yeah, we're getting ready to launch a new website. We have a current sort of blog feed on the news section of our existing website, but definitely are going to be focusing on putting out a lot more material on the industry and then on what we're doing, and then even on some of the projects that we can. It's one of the most challenging things with, being early in with some of the high-end equipment. A lot of our customers are people that don't want to share their information.
Yeah.
So we've got these great stories to tell, and oftentimes very hard to tell the story. But we're going to figure out a way to really communicate that more, and look forward to Q1, Q2 this year.
Cool.
Ramping that up.
So what's the website?
SkytecLLC.com.
Okay.
It's SKYTEC. not
SKYTECLLC.com.
Yep.
Skytec, and Bill Rogers and Andy Carroll, the two founders of the company, and pushing things forward. Great discussion today, guys. I look forward to hearing about all of the success that you'll have in the future, and hopefully InfoSystems can help in any way we possibly can. But thanks for the conversation. Thanks for taking the time to come out and talk on the podcast today. And if I get any questions or feedback, I'll definitely send it your way.
Okay, appreciate you having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Great.